Hello friends, let me take you through Henry Graham Greene. We all know him by the name of Graham Greene. He is a very famous author, born on 2nd October 1904 to 3rd April 1991. Better known by his pen name Graham Greene, was regarded by many as one of the leading English novelists of the 20th century. Greene combined literary acclaim with widespread popularity. He acquired a reputation early in his lifetime as a major writer, both of serious Catholic novels and of thrillers or entertainments, as he termed them. He was shortlisted in 1966 and 1967 for the Nobel Prize for Literature. In his 67 years of writings, which included over 25 novels, he explored both the ambivalent moral and political issues of the modern world, often through a Catholic perspective. Although Greene objected strongly to his being described as a Roman Catholic novelist rather than a novelist who happened to be a Catholic, Catholic religious themes are at the root of most of his writings, especially in 4 of his Catholic novels. That is, Brighton Rock, The Power and the Glory, The Heart of the Matter, and The End of the Affair. Several of his works, such as The Confidential Agent, The Quiet American, Our Man in Havana, The Human Factor, and his screenplay for The Third Man, also show Greene's avid interest in the workings and intrigues of international politics and espionage. Greene was born in Berkhamsted in Hertfordshire into a large influential family that include the owners of the Greene King Brewery. He boarded at Berkhamsted School in Hertfordshire, where his father taught and became headmaster. Unhappy at the school, he attempted suicide several times. He attended Balliol College, Oxford, to study history, where as an undergraduate, he published his first work in 1925, a poorly received volume of poetry titled Babbling April. He converted to a Catholic in 1926 after meeting his future wife, Vivian Darrell Browning. Later in life, he took to calling himself a Catholic agnostic. He published his first novel, The Man Within, in 1929. Its favorable response enabled him to work full-time as a novelist. He supplemented his novel's income with freelance journalism and book and film reviews. Greene originally divided his fiction into 2 genres, which he described as entertainments and novels. His thrillers often had notable philosophical edges, such as The Ministry of Fear. His literary works, on which he thought his literary reputation rested, was The Power and the Glory. Greene had a history of depression which had a profound effect on his writings and personal life. In a letter to his wife Vivian, he told her that he had a character profoundly antagonistic to ordinary domestic life. Graham Greene was born in 1904 in St. John's House, a boarding house of Berkhamsted School in Hertfordshire, where his father was a housemaster. He was the 4th of the 6 children. His younger brother Hugh became Director General of the BBC, and his elder brother Raymond, an eminent physician and mountaineer. Greene's father, Charles Henry Greene, and mother, Marion Raymond Greene, were first cousins, both members of a large influential family that included the owners of Greene King Brewery, bankers, and statesmen. His mother was the cousin of famous novelist Robert Louis Stevenson. Charles Greene, Graham Greene's father, was the second master at Berkhamsted School, where the headmaster was Dr. Thomas Fry, who was married to Charles' cousin. In his childhood, Greene spent his summers with his uncle. In 1910, Graham Greene's father, Charles Greene, succeeded Dr. Fry as a headmaster of Berkhamsted School. Graham also attended the school as a boarder. Bullied and profoundly depressed, he made several suicide attempts that he even wrote in his autobiography by trying Russian roulette. Russian roulette is the practice of loading a bullet into one chamber of a revolver, spinning the cylinder, and then pulling the trigger while pointing the gun at your own at your own head, and also by taking aspirin before going swimming in the school pool. In 1920, at the age of 16, he was sent for psychoanalysis for 6 months in London, after which he returned to school as a day scholar. His school friends included British journalists Claude Cockburn and Peter Quennell, the historian. In 1922, Greene was, for a short time, a member of the Communist Party of Great Britain and sought an invitation to the Soviet Union, of which nothing came through. Since Greene suffered from periodic bouts of depression while at Oxford, he largely kept to himself. His contemporary in Oxford, Evelyn Waugh, noted that Graham Greene looked down on us and perhaps all undergraduates as childish and ostentatious. He certainly shared in none of our revelry. He graduated in 1925 with a second-class degree in history. After leaving Oxford, Greene worked for a period of time as a private tutor and then turned to journalism, first in Nottingham Journal and then as a sub-editor in Times. While he was working in Nottingham, he started corresponding with Vivian Darrell Browning, who had written to him to correct him on a point of Catholic doctrine. Greene was agnostic at the time, but later he began to think of marrying Vivian. He started associating himself with Catholic faith. Greene was baptized on 26 February 1926. They married on 15th October 1927 at St. Mary's Church, Hampstead in North London. Greene's first published novel was The Man Within in 1929. Favorable response emboldened him to quit his sub-editor's job in the Times and work as a full-time novelist. The next two books, The Name of Action 1930 and Rumour at Nightfall 1932, were unsuccessful. He later disowned them. His first true success was Stumble Train 1932, which was taken over by the Book Society and adapted as the film Orient Express in 1934. He supplemented his novelist's income with freelance journalism, book and film reviews for The Spectator and co-editing magazine Night and Day. Greene's 1937 film review of Wee Willie Winkie for Night and Day, which said that the 9-year-old star Shirley Temple displayed a dubious coquetry that appealed to middle-aged men and clergymen, provided 20th Century Fox successfully to sue Greene for £3,500 plus costs, and Greene leaving the UK to live in Mexico until after the trial was over. While in Mexico, Greene developed the ideas for his novel, often considered his masterpiece, The Power and the Glory. By the 1950s, Greene had become known as one of the finest writers of his generation. As his career lengthened, both Greene and his readers found the distinction between entertainments and novels increasingly problematic. The last book of his oeuvre that Greene termed an entertainment was Our Man in Havana in 1958. Greene also wrote short stories and plays which were well received, though he was known first and foremost as a novelist. His first play, The Living Room, debuted in 1953. Michael Corder, a lifelong friend of Greene and later his editor at Simon & Schuster, once observed Greene at work. Corder observed that Greene wrote in small black leather notebook with a black fountain pen and would write approximately 500 words. Corder described this as Graham's daily penance. Once he finished, he would put the notebook away for the rest of the day. His writing influences included Conrad, Ford, Haggard, Stevenson, James, Proust, Bacon and Pegwee. Greene travelled far from England to what we call the world's wildest and remote places. The travels led to his being recruited into MI6 by his sister Elizabeth, who worked for the agency. Accordingly, he was posted in Sierra Leone during the Second World War. Kim Philby, who was later revealed as a Soviet agent, was Greene's supervisor and friend at MI6. Greene later wrote an introduction for Philby's 1968 memoir, My Silent War. As a novelist, Greene wove the characters he met and places where he lived into the fabric of his novel. Greene first left Europe at the age of 13, 1935, on a trip to Liberia that produced the travel book Journey Without Maps. His 1938 trip to Mexico to see effects of government's campaign of forced anti-Catholic secularization was paid for by the publishing house Longman. Thanks to his friendship with Tom Burns, that voyage produced two books, The Lawless Roads, published as Another Mexico in the US, and the novel The Power and the Glory. In 1953, the Holy Office informed Greene that The Power and the Glory was damaging to the reputation of the priesthood. But later, in a private audience with Greene, Pope Paul VI told him that although parts of his novel would offend some Catholics, he should ignore the criticism. Greene first traveled to Haiti in 1954, where his novel The Comedians is set, which was then under the rule of dictator Francois Duvalier, known as Papa Doc, frequently staying at the Hotel Olofsson in Port-au-Prince, and in the late 1950s as inspiration for his novel A Burnt Out Case, published in 1960. Greene spent time traveling around Africa, visiting a number of leper colonies in Congo Basin and in what were then the British Cameroons. During his trip in late February and early March 1959, he met André the Young several times, a Belgian resistance fighter responsible for establishing an escape route for downed airmen from Belgium to Pyrenees, somewhere between Spain and France. In 1957, just months after Fidel Castro began his revolutionary assault on the Batista regime in Cubs, Greene played a small role in helping the revolutionaries as a secret courier transporting warm clothing for Castro's rebels hiding in the hills during the Cuban winter. Greene was said to have a fascination with strong leaders, which may have accounted for his interest in Castro, whom he later met. After one visit, Castro gave Greene a painting he had done, which hung in the living room of the French house where the author spent the last years of his life. Greene did later voice doubts about Castro's Cuba, telling French interviewer in 1983, I admire him for his courage and his efficiency, but I question his authoritarianism, adding, all successful revolutions, however idealistic they are, probably betray themselves over time. After falling victim to a financial swindler, Greene chose to leave Britain in 1966, moving to Antibes in France to be close to Yvonne Cloetta, whom he had known since 1959, a relationship that endured until his death. In 1973, he had uncredited cameo appearance as an insurance company representative in Francois Truffaut's film Day for Night. In 1981, Greene was awarded the Jerusalem Prize, generally awarded to writers concerned with freedom of the individual in society. In the last years of his life, he lived in Vevey on Lake Geneva in Switzerland, the same town where Charlie Chaplin lived at this time. He visited Chaplin often, and the two were great friends. His book, Dr. Fisher of Geneva, or The Bomb Party, published in 1980, is based on themes of combined philosophical and geographical influences. He ceased going to Mass and confession in the 1950s, but in his final years he began to receive the sacraments again from Father Leopoldo Duran, a Spanish priest who became his friend. In one of his final works, a pamphlet titled J Accused, which means strong denunciation, The Dark Side of Nice, 1982, Greene wrote of a legal matter that embroiled him and his extended family in Nice, and declared that organized crime flourished in Nice because of the city's upper levels of civic government protected judicial and police corruption. The accusation provoked a libel suit with which Greene lost, but he was vindicated after his death when in 1994 the former mayor of Nice Jack Smitsa was imprisoned for corruption and associated crimes. In 1984, in celebration of his 80th birthday, the brewery, which Greene's grandfather founded in 1799, made a special edition of its St. Edmund's Ale for him with a special label in his honor. In 1986, Greene was awarded Britain's Order of Merit. He died in 1991 at the age of 86 of leukemia and was buried in Codges Cemetery. So friends, that's all for today. That was Graham Greene. I shall come again soon with another author. Till then, goodbye and see you.